Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, do we got something interesting for you today. We have a reporter on Fox 11, can you believe this, being broadcasted on Fox 11, who asked semi-decent questions to a bunch of people running for U.S. Senate to replace Senator Dianne Feinstein, the late Senator Dianne Feinstein's seat in California. This is a tight race between Adam Schiff, Hobbs, I think Barbara Lee, and one other person, which I'm not too familiar with, but it's a tight race. I'm seeing the polling data is like, I think it's 29 for Adam Schiff, 19 for like Katie Hobbs, 17 for Barbara Lee. It's a very close race. It's really anybody's game as it is right now. I'm waiting for the field to narrow down a little bit and to see how it all falls down as other candidates start to drop out and endorse each other. Anyway, they sat down and they had a debate about foreign policy, and I don't get to see many debates about foreign policy on the national stage like this. Definitely when we're talking about Congress or Senate, there's some, but they don't happen that often. And so when it does happen and I get to see politicians have to directly debate foreign policy, I always like to jump on it because I want to make sure that we see exactly who is making the decisions in our legislative branch on how to hold our executive branch accountable in dealing with these crises. Let's check it out.
Member Lee, on October 8th, less than 24 hours.
Now, Congresswoman Lee, Barbara Lee, is the only person on stage who has called for a ceasefire. And she's also well known for being the only person who voted against the invasion of Afghanistan because she said there wasn't an end game. She also, of course, opposed the invasion of Iraq, which she will use and utilize here.
Member Lee, on October 8th, less than 24 hours after that attack, you called for an immediate ceasefire.
Context for the Afghan vote, it wasn't that she didn't want to invade Afghanistan, it's that she didn't have an end game and she wasn't happy with that, which she turned out to be right about.
If that happens now, if there is an immediate ceasefire, what's to stop Hamas from retaking control and launching another October 7th?
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, I call.
This is a good question, and what I like about this journalist question is he poses the questions to the perfect people who needed it to be posed to. So I'm happy that they posed this to Barbara Lee instead of just posing it to one of the other people so they could grandstand on the issue.
Called for a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire. Israel deserves to live in peace with security, free from Hamas and all terrorist attacks. And I'm going to continue to condemn the horrific attacks of October 7th and work to make sure that whatever I can do to ensure that the administration, as it continues this war in Gaza that has killed now 25,000 people, that is counterproductive to Israel's security. The only way Israel is going to be secure is through a permanent ceasefire. The only way that is going to happen is with a political and diplomatic solution. The path to peace and to a secure Israel and a secure state for the Palestinians, with yes, I do believe we have to see the end game, and it should be a two-state solution. Killing 25,000 civilians, it's catastrophic, and it will never lead to peace for the Israelis nor the Palestinians.
Congressman Schiff, you have not called for.
So I do want to say again, her time in Congress, she has a legacy of critiquing this very part of American foreign policy, which is going into something and going into a conflict without a plan to get out of here. Now, obviously, we would not be the ones managing everything here. This isn't our war, so to speak. It's the Israelis' war, which we are enabling after October 7th. So I do want to point out that this is something that she's been consistent on. So this isn't like an issue that she flip-flops on. And I want to give her respect for that, because there's a lot of people in foreign policy who literally just go with the wind. For example, Trump was in favor of the Iraq war until it went awry. And Trump is in favor of, stopping all these forever wars unless he's proposing invading Venezuela. He's de-escalating and stopping all the violence until he increases all the drone strikes and kills Soleimani. It's like there's not like a consistency in the foreign policy there. And it's not just a Trump problem. I think Trump was the worst example of it. It's a general problem with, I think, American Congress people, where a lot of them will just either listen to what their advisors tell them, which I don't think it's bad to reject experts, but you need to have opinions of your own as well. You need to do your own research, or they'll just do whatever the wind tells them to do. Oh, is this popular? We'll do this. Oh, is this popular? We'll do that. And you're seeing a lot of Republicans right now do what the wind or what Trump is telling them to do when it comes to aid to Ukraine, for example. But Barbara Lee has been consistent about this when it comes to both the war in Iraq and especially the war in Afghanistan when it comes to endgame, endgame, endgame. So I do want to give her credit for that. And I do agree with her in principle that until there is some body, and a state is the most obvious body to do it, and I think that they deserve a state, until the Palestinians have a state which they can manage their own affairs unimpeded by, for example, blockades and economic coercion or occupation, then I think that will be the only foundation that could build a stable peace. Because outside of that, what you're going to do, if the Israelis don't want to have a long-term military deployment in the Gaza Strip, which the majority don't from the polling data I've seen, I think it was like 53% don't want to see Israeli troops in Gaza, and after 3 years from now, like in 3 years in the future, against 30% who do. So it's not popular. And so if they don't want to have troops there, something has to manage the law of the land, and the state is the obvious example, and they deserve a state to represent themselves. And if you don't create a state, then what's going to happen? You destroy Hamas, you hunt into every corner of the globe, and then Palestinian Islamic Jihad fills the power vacuum. If you destroy ISIS, but then leave all of the conditions for ISIS to resurge, then either ISIS will resurge, or in this case, Hamas will come back, or, even though, of course, not the exact same organization, or another group will take its place.
Ceasefire. Why do you think that Congresswoman Lee is wrong?
Well, first of all, I go back to October 7th, to the brutal murder of 1,200 people. And not just murder, but rape and torture. The magnitude of that.
Do you remember Trump's nickname for Adam Schiff? It was Adam Shifty Shift. It was my favorite out of all of the Trump nicknames.
Horror is still shocking to me. No country, after having been attacked by terrorists.
And you want to know why they didn't like Schiff? Is because he was basically the spokesperson for like Trump impeachment. He'd go up before Congress and in a very boring, monotone way, list out all the things Trump did bad. And I mean, that's what got him Shifty Shift. He didn't do anything particularly shifty. He's not like he was found engaged in like horrible corruption that Trump caught out. No more lobbying than anybody else in Congress, really. It was just Shifty Shift because he wanted to help impeach Trump.
Like Israel was on October 7th. No country could refuse to defend.
A lot of Trump's names don't even make sense. It's just fun to say. Like Ron DeSanctimonious is very fun. It doesn't really, I think, match him all that well, though. It wasn't one of his better nicknames.
It's like Israel was on October 7th. No country could refuse to defend itself. It has a duty to defend itself, and I think the United States should support Israel in defending itself. We also should work with Israel to reduce the number of civilian casualties, and my heart breaks for all the Palestinians who have lost lives, all the families that have lost lives. It's not, in my view, incompatible with human nature to grieve the loss of both innocent Palestinians as well as innocent Israelis. I support a two-state solution. We have to get back to a road to a two-state solution, but Israel has to defend itself. We can't leave Hamas governing Gaza. They're still holding over 100 hostages, including Americans. I don't know how you can ask any nation to cease fire when their people are being held by a terrorist organization.
And the rebuttal to Congresswoman Lee, how do you?
Well, let me just say, first of all, I voted against the authorization to use military force right after the horrific attacks of 9/11.
Let me be clear, though. When it comes to those hostages, we already saw how that can go awry with those hostages that were shot while they were carrying the white flag. We don't know where all the hostages are. It's not just you bomb them and then the hostages, once you hit like a certain score, will just appear. This isn't a video game where you just got to like hold out against the enemy for 30 minutes and then the hostages just show up. No, they're going to hide them in the deepest nook and cranny where you cannot find them by force. And they're not going to keep them all together. They're going to spread them out. So even if you're able to find the locations of a few, there's going to be others who you can't. The only way you're going to get those hostages out really, odds are, is through some negotiation, some negotiated settlement. So whether or not, like you say, oh, negotiate with them while they have the hostages, I think that's the only way you're going to get the hostages. Now, he was saying specifically ceasefire, but I do want to throw that out there because I hear people say, oh, don't negotiate with terrorists. They kidnapped their hostages. How else are you going to get the hostages back? This isn't a situation where, like, it's a bank robbery and there's 2 robbers in a bank and we know where all the hostages are. And so maybe if we throw in some, like, knockout gas, or knockout gas isn't real, but so doing something, we can try to, well, we know where the hostages are. We can go in, try to save them quick. We don't even know that. So it's kind of difficult to view it through that same lens. We do need to negotiate to get these hostages out.
The rebuttal to Congresswoman Virginia, how do you?
Well, let me just say, first of all, I voted against.
That doesn't mean not negotiating from a position of strength, but it's going to take, at some point, negotiation.
The authorization to use military force right after the horrific attacks of 9/11. I voted against the Iraq authorization. I said then, and I'm saying now, it could spiral out of control. You see what's happening. It's escalating in the region. We have to make sure that our national security is also protected. And in fact, as this war escalates, as the Arab nations pull back, then what do we have? We do not have a path to Israel's security, nor do we have a path to a Palestinian state. It will spiral out of control like I said it did and would after 2001, and it did.
It's smart for her to base it in her previous statements about the war in Afghanistan, saying, hey, I was prophetic then, I can be prophetic again. Look, I don't know if it's going to spiral out of control into a wider war. Odds are still against it, mostly because there's motivations amongst all the parties in question for it not to spiral out into a wider war. The Iranians don't really want it to be a wider war because they can't afford it, and there's a question about whether they can win it. The Americans don't want it for obvious political reasons, with the campaign coming around and Biden just not wanting to pursue a war with Iran. He was part of the administration that negotiated the Iran deal. He probably doesn't want to go to war with the Iranians. And the Israelis are having trouble enough with Gaza, and so there is a motivation for them to not try to expand that war. But I will say that is probably the weakest pillar, because that coalition at the top, man, they know they're unpopular. They know the majority of their public doesn't like them. And I think that they might look at it kind of like, we've got 2 years, let's see what we can do. And considering their strikes in southern Lebanon, I don't know, but I still think there's more motivations for them to not. Point is, though, I think that most of the actors involved don't want it to spiral out into a wider war, but that doesn't mean that a wider war cannot still happen. World War I was not a bunch of parties coming together saying, yip, yip, yo, hey, we all want to die, right? They spiraled out due to intermingling alliances. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that was nobody walked into World War I completely wanting what happened. So it can happen by accident. Human error could spiral out into a war. For example, let's say that one of these strikes on one of these ships, then maybe the Houthis don't even intend to necessarily kill someone, but they do end up killing someone because you're firing rockets at ships full of, like, civilian sailors, and it ends up killing people. And so the American government, and in a campaign year especially, feels like they have to respond, and so they bomb the Houthis even harder. And after bombing the Houthis even harder, some militia in Iraq, some Iranian-backed proxy militia in Iraq, fires upon an American base. And then America responds to that and then kills some Iraqi militants. And it spirals out, especially if any Americans start dying. From our perspective, it can spiral out. So that's why it would be better for the situation to de-escalate sooner rather than later. That doesn't mean like de-escalate solely for the purpose of de-escalation, give everything up, obviously. But de-escalation sooner is much better than later, considering that this is a real risk that we could all still stumble into. And we've got other foreign policy crises we got to deal with. And I think that our M777 howitzer shells are a little preoccupied right now.
Congressmember Porter, some critics have said you've tried to have it both ways on this. You just heard two different worldviews laid out on this. Where are you, and which one do you agree with?
Well, I join millions of Americans around the country in mourning what has happened, the loss of Israeli lives and the loss of Palestinian lives. And we need, as the United States, to be pushing for the conditions that can get us to a bilateral, durable peace. This is a very difficult situation, and the conditions...
Did you guys know that 48 senators... no, it was 49 Democratic senators voted in favor of our message to endorse the two-state solution? You want to know the two Democratic senators that voted against it? And by the way, it wasn't like we condemn Israel. It was simply, we say that the official position of us is two-state solution. That's really all it said. And that was, I think, probably in part response to Netanyahu rejecting the idea. The two people in the Democratic Party who did it was Joe Manchin, okay, that's to be expected, and John Fetterman, who said, you know, he did want to actually vote in favor of it because he likes the two-state solution, but there just was not enough condemnation of Hamas in the article. My God. Who would have thought when John Fetterman took office that it would be the Joe Manchin, John Fetterman camp together right here? Politics does sure have twists and turns, huh?
Conditions on the ground in Gaza have changed as the conflict has evolved. And so I have called for a permanent ceasefire, and I've pushed and identified with specificity what needs to happen to bring Gaza and to bring the people of Gaza to a better future and to make sure that Israel can stay secure. So I've called for a release for all the hostages, resources to rebuild Gaza, making sure Israel is secure and a free state for Palestinians where they can thrive.
So just to be clear, she's calling for a ceasefire right now. You're saying we need to do all this other stuff first, right?
The parties to this conflict are Israel and Hamas. Ceasefire is not a magic word. You can't say it and make it so. But we have to push as the United States, as a world leader, for us to get to a ceasefire and to avoid another forever war.
Alex, if you don't have a permanent ceasefire now, more people are going to get killed, and there'll be less security that is even possible for the Israelis and for Israel in the future if we don't do this right now.
Mr. Garvey, to you, you say that we need to stand with Israel, but there also have been thousands of innocent Palestinians who have died in all of this. Does that trouble you? And is there a threshold where we could see death of innocent Palestinians that means the U.S. should pull back from its support of Israel militarily, financially?
Oh boy, here we go. Look at that. Dude, there has never been a man on my screen that screamed at me louder than this man is right now. The two words, smarmy politician. Just say, this guy looks like one of the evil mayor of a Batman movie that you didn't find out was the real bad guy until the end, who was in cahoots with the Joker. That's what this guy looks like. He looks like a Gotham City ass mayor. Okay, let's watch.
Could see death of innocent Palestinians. That means the U.S. should pull back from its support of Israel militarily, financially.
I stand with Israel yesterday, today, and tomorrow for whatever their needs are.
He even talks like one, man. I'm sorry. He reminds me of Kevin Spacey in House of Cards, which is not a look you should be going to, especially post Kevin Spacey updates.
One of our greatest allies, and our greatest ally in the East. That day was atrocious. Terrorists, while Israelis slept, performed atrocities. With common sense and compassion, we realize that we have to give Israel the opportunity to fulfill their sovereignty, to fight back. I think it's naive to think that we can ask our government to tell them or try to influence them to cease fire. If 9/11 became 9/12 and one of our allies came to us and said, we want you to cease fire, what would we have done? We would have looked at them. Thank you for being our ally, but we must control our destiny and our sovereignty.
Yeah, but the difference would be is we're going out to fight Al-Qaeda, and while we're going out to fight Al-Qaeda and invade Afghanistan, we say, somebody asks, so what are we going to do in Afghanistan afterwards? Is there going to be, and we say, what Afghanistan? Afghanistan never existed. Afghanistan's fake. In fact, we're going to make it the Afghanistan Authority, and we're going to get Timmy and Jimmy to set up tents out over here, and this is going to be called New York. New York. Like, it's not, you can't really combine these two things. It'd be one thing if it was just, we go in there, build up, it's not, they're not going in there to just build up Palestine and then leave and be like, okay, there's a Palestinian state. They haven't declared themselves to that. So if there's not going to be a state for Palestinians to represent themselves, then we can't really compare our war against Al-Qaeda to their war against Hamas in that way, because there's an element that's completely different, and that is the interest in long-term occupation. There was never an interest in us making Afghanistan America too. There was an interest in having a friendly government there, and there's an interest in Israel, even amongst those who want a state, amongst there probably being a friendly government in Palestine. But there was never an idea of Afghanistan's just going to become America, or this is permanent, this is just going to be America too. This has always been a part of America. And so I don't really think you can compare these two wars, because the parties involved are saying they have interests that are outside of the aspect of just terrorism. It also has to do with long-term occupation and denying people representation in a state. Yes, they both have to do with the topic of terrorism, but not all terrorism is the same. Not all terrorism has the same solutions if the social issue that created the terrorism is different. If in one area the thing that created the terrorism was poverty, like horrific poverty, then addressing the poverty would probably be a solution there. If over here it's denying a certain minority the right to vote, the solution is probably giving them the right to vote. That doesn't mean always like seceding to the demands of terrorists, but it means trying to rob the terrorists of the foundation that they use to build their support. And it is the occupation which Hamas uses to build its support.
Compassion, yes. Has Israel had ceasefires, short ceasefires? That makes a statement for how they feel about the compassion to Palestinians.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Our government's policy is to support a two-state solution, and Benjamin Netanyahu has totally said no, that is not possible.
And Alex, I think Californians need to know whether Mr. Garvey supports a two-state solution. What is his vision for the future of the people of Gaza?
Ooh, yeah, good. Get him, Katie.
Do you?
I feel it's also naive to think that a two-state solution can happen even in our generation. The difficulty.
Wait, what? Yeah, no one said it was going to be easy, but here's the problem. Even if this is his answer, and even if he's right, it still isn't a good answer. Because when Netanyahu rejected the idea of a two-state solution, he didn't just say, I don't want a two-state solution now. I don't want a two-state solution tomorrow. It was, I don't want a two-state solution really forever. He was answering a question about, hey, there is this deal that is being offered, which is the Arab states will handle rebuilding in Gaza. This was the America-Saudi deal. The Arab states will handle rebuilding Gaza. You'll get all your prisoners back. I know it was the Gaza. It was getting all your prisoners back. You get Saudi normalization. There was a few other benefits as well, but it was a fantastic deal. And the only thing they had to agree to was that eventually, someday in the future, there will be a Palestinian state. And not only will there be a Palestinian state, and this is another plus for them, but it will be a demilitarized Palestinian state, meaning they will not have a standing army. What a deal. My goodness, that's a fantastic deal. And if they were to agree to said deal, that would really undercut a lot of Hamas's base of support, a lot of their geopolitical support. And let me say, the Saudis would be taking a political risk to agree to such a deal, considering how unpopular Israel is in the Saudi public. In a way, the Saudis are actually sticking out their political neck here to try to find a solution. And he wouldn't agree to it. So even if you were to go by this guy's standard of, well, I mean, even in this generation, all the deal stipulated is that one day they would be a state, some point in the future. That has no legal binding to it, in which it has to be a week, a month, a year. So no, I don't think this answer's piss poor. This answer's piss poor. He's dodging. He's dodging.
Even the minds that have been involved with this situation over the years, going back 75 years, know that a peace was broken, and it was broken on the 7th.
Yeah.
And it won't be until the next generation when we'll be able to talk about that again.
Well, those that don't believe in a two-state solution don't believe in peace and security for Israel nor for Palestine.
Okay.
Damn. Damn. I don't think she's wrong, though.